Number 1, of course, is Nikola Jokic. Nobody's making any kind of argument to move anybody ahead of him in a fantasy draft. He will go first in almost every format. Could a particular player be the number 2 fantasy player this coming season? Could it happen? Why will it happen? Why won't it happen? Luka finished at number 28 on a per-game basis last year, played in 65 out of 82 games. Does Luka have a chance to be the number 2 player in all of fantasy basketball? The answer is a pretty resounding no, unless you believe that his free throw number magically jumps from 75 to 83. He's hyper elite in scoring, threes, rebounds, assists, but there just can't be that one sizable negative. There's just literally nothing more he can do on the counting side. He needs to fix other parts of his game for him to get into that grouping in 9-cat. Steph got off to an excellent start and then petered out a little bit. He got hurt. Dude was number 6 per game, despite shooting basically a career low. I mean, if that comes back up near where he had been for the better part of half a decade, he's right in that top 3 mix. There is, and always has been, a championship hangover. He's got nothing to prove again. What are the odds of Steph Curry being the number 2 player in fantasy at the end of this year on a per-game basis? It's certainly higher than Luka's. But he only had to take 19 shots a game this last season, and there's sort of no reason for that number to go up. They're not going to lean more heavily on Steph after winning the championship. The Sixers center had a brilliant campaign. He was number 3 on a per-game basis. There's just sort of nothing that screams large change in what his gig is in the offense. He got even better when Harden was around because he wasn't the only player that teams had to guard. Can he play 68 ball games, which he did? This is a guy that had missed all 82, 51, 19, 18, 21, 2 years in a row, and then 14. This last season was the outlier. Are they so good that even in the first round, we can overlook the fact that they're not super durable? Kevin Durant, even though he missed 27 ball games this year, he was still a first rounder by totals. Well, let's say he doesn't have an injury that knocks him out for a month and a half. Maybe he only has little nagging things. If that adds up to, say, 15 games missed, he does actually end up the number 2 player in fantasy this last year. We don't know where he's going to be playing on opening day. Wherever he ends up, he is a fantasy juggernaut. It's going to require that he plays mid to high 60s in games. That's asking a lot. Kevin Durant is really the only other player in the NBA who has a shot at that number 2 per game marker. Is what we saw this last season, James Harden played 65 out of 82, which certainly not good by Harden standards. Really, for many seasons, Harden in 8 category was the runaway number 1 guy. But then came back this last season, and it all got worse. He just wasn't happy. And then after going to Philadelphia, there's a fit-in process that needed to happen there. We know he has a fantasy profile that can get him into the top few players. We know he wants to be in Philadelphia. Health and usage took substantial hits. So I think he's going to be better. Harden at number 12 was kind of about as bad as it could get. But is he going to get back up to number 2? Why, I highly doubt that. Truly insane numbers, even kind of by LeBron James standards. He was number 4 on a per-game basis this last season, and for stretches, he was the number 2 guy. What if the Lakers sit Russ? What if they trade Russ and they bring in role player types? It doesn't change things all that much for me. The only one that would probably change it would be if Kyrie was the guy coming back. The way that LeBron James gets past Joel Embiid or Kevin Durant is to go from 75.5% at the free throw line to like 78% at the foul line. I would argue that LeBron isn't that far back, but I don't know how LeBron does more than he did this last year and stays healthy for the season. Would I draft LeBron number 2 overall? I mean, that's the question at the end of all this. Almost definitely no, but LeBron is by no means out of the question there. Usually someone is going to be a bit undervalued and they overperform, and that was Trey Young last year. He was number 11 on a per-game basis. Very strong free throw impact guy. Played in 76 games. Absurd level of usage was a big deal, but the fact that he shot 46% and turned that field goal percent into kind of a non-factor, could you take him at number 2? I think the answer is a pretty resounding no, because last year was a best case scenario, and he was number 4 by totals. You're still talking about someone who is likely to take a pretty substantial per game hit. There's only so many possessions in a ball game. Pre-Trae and DeJounte playing together, Trey Young orchestrated almost all of them. Cat was number 3 by totals last year, played in 74 out of 82 ball games. We simply can't ignore that Minnesota traded for Rudy Gobert. Cat is going to lose rebounds. He'll still get his 16 and some odd shots, maybe more three-pointers. That would hurt field goal percent. Blocks might take a hit. You have to have some per game upside. And with Cat, you're talking about per game downside right now. First third of the season, LaMelo Ball was number 8. Well, he tapered off. Over the last 50 games, LaMelo was number 34. The jump to 2 is basically like doubling your fantasy value. You could see LaMelo get around the turn on a per game basis with a few incremental bumps. And then if he plays in 75 games again, you're a top 5 guy by totals. We can't say after one healthy season he's a healthy player. He did have a big injury in his rookie season. He would have to take a flying leap forward to get into the top 5 per game. Worst case, he could do what he did the second half of this last year. 30. Haliburton got moved to a team where he was the primary. Played 26 games at the end of the year with Indiana, averaged 17.5 points, almost 10 assists, 4 boards, 2.4 combined defensive stats, 50% from the field, and 85% at the free throw line. That still only put Tyrese at number 16 on a per game basis. Haliburton played in 76 games over the season. He was number 7 by totals. If he played in 77 games as top 15, 16 per game fantasy guy, or let's say he does take a small step forward in Indiana, then he's exactly what Trey Young was, number 4 by totals. And you kind of have to look at it and think, what's left to do here? Giannis, one of the best field goal percent guys in the NBA, 55% on almost 19 shots per game. Now, the free throw thing, it's an issue because dude still takes among the highest free throw count, but only hits 72%. That's the only thing that matters with Giannis because you know he's going to get you about league average number of games played. That's where he's been at for 3 years in a row. Giannis isn't a top 2 or 3 fantasy player unless his free throw percent comes back up where it has been before. Jayson Tatum was number 15 on a per game basis this year, number 5 by totals. So Tatum needs to probably get to at least number 10 per game, maintain what was a crazy level of durability. He played like 92% of his team's games. Steals actually fell off a bit. And I don't think he's going to take many more shots because the Celtics actually brought in more scorers. Celtics made the finals last year. There's a hangover effect that can come from that. There just isn't a way for him to chunk off enough to get to that like number 9 or 8 zone where he would probably need to be plus durability to get into the conversation for number 2. No one has a clear case for number 2. ADP is going to reflect the guys that are a number 2 in some other format. The beauty, however, is there's almost no difference between 2 and 9. I think I'd probably rather be like pick 8 because I get a much easier pick in round 2. Which of those guys actually pan out is going to play an enormous role on what teams in your league can actually compete with the team that has Nikola Jokic.